Hello, my name is Beth Schwenke, and I'm a senior in animal science, and my topic for Animal Science 416 Equine Management is wild horse roundup management. In the western United States, it is common to see wild herds of horses freely roaming on protected lands. A couple times a year, they round up these beautiful and majestic creatures. They do this to control the population and eventually give them a good home. In order to control the population, the Bureau of Land Management, also known as BLM, conducts roundups each year, but according to some people, this routine can be controversial, especially how they are conducted. To start with, the first interaction between horses and man was about 10,000 years ago in the Western Hemisphere. In that time period, horses were seen as a food source. After a while, the horse became extinct in America. A common theory for why this happened was that since they were a food source, they were overly hunted. Then eventually, the Spanish was the nation that brought back the horse into the Western Hemisphere. Horses changed the lives of many people, including the Native Americans in the Great Plains. They made hunting and traveling more accessible. When Europeans settled in America, they started making their way west, which brought more horses to this region. Since the new settlers were going into Native American territory, there were many raids which caused many horses to run wild. Also, horses just got loose and which started their own herds. The Mustangs have many different breed lines since many horses of different breeds got turned wild after a long period of time. Now the issue is overpopulation of the Mustangs. As of March 28, 2014, there are about 33,780 head of Mustangs. According to data that the BLM gathered, there was about 20 different roundups for the end of the 2012 and 2013 year. The BLM does this to keep the population of feral Mustangs manageable. Next is going to be a discussion of why wild horse roundups need to be done. When horses go through this process, they experience stress, but the BLM tries to make it less stressful for them. Wild horse roundups happen so the land doesn't get too trampled or ruined, and so the horses do not get overpopulated. First of all, when horses didn't have any protected land, especially for them, they were a nuisance to ranchers and were usually targets to be slaughtered. Another popular way ranchers got rid of these feral horses was to poison the water holes. Many people were outraged that this was happening, so a lady named Velma Johnson sparked a campaign to encourage state and federal governments to help protect the wild horse. Congress responded in 1971 and passed the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act that authorized only the BLM could gather up the wild horses as part of their work to preserve federal lands. The BLM is based out of the U.S. Department of the Interior and is primarily manage the free roaming horse populations. The law that was passed in 1971 mandates that BLM and other federal agencies monitor horse numbers, determine appropriate population levels, and preserve and maintain a thriving natural ecological balance. Stated before, these roundups happen to control the populations, and according to PBS.org, horses can repopulate at a rate of 18% per year. Also, horses do not have very many predators to keep the population down, so the roundups are the best option, and then they can go to loving homes. One of the ways BLM can determine to conduct a roundup is by monitoring numbers using aerial surveys and captures and removes horses from rangelands when horse numbers exceed target population size. The BLM have been using helicopters in their roundups since 1976 to corral wild horses. By using helicopters, they can drive the horses many miles and have better control of them. Then they are loaded up into trucks and transported to holding pens. The roundups can last a couple days to a couple weeks. It all depends on what the horses are being rounded up for. Once the horses are in their holding pens, they are separated by their age and sex, and mares with foals are kept separately. The short-term pens have enough space for the horses to include clean water and feed. while the long-term holding pens, which include large ranches, to allow them to roam freely. This is when officials determine if the horse is eligible for adoption or if they need to go back into the wild or to the long-term holding pens. Roundups take up a lot of time and require special management techniques. The BLM has many management issues to figure out before a roundup takes place. They need to have holding pens, and they need to know how many depends on the population of the local herds. Horses that are removed from public lands are processed in short-term holding facilities, similar to like cattle feedlots, and held for several months or more. Since the females could be pregnant when captured, this adds to the cost. The number of feral horses that BLM rounds up surpasses how many people want to adopt a Mustang. Horses can be adopted from the short-term holding facilities, and some are removed through death, sales, or released back into public lands. This graph over to your right can show how much the cost will increase and the number of horses over time is going to increase. The excess animals are eventually transferred to private pastures, primarily in the Midwest, that are contracted as long-term holding facilities. Since only a small number are sold, these horses usually stay here until they die of natural causes. However, because of pressure from horse activates, administrative directives and congressional appropriation bills prohibit killing healthy horses. Therefore, BLM is left with a large number of captive horses that must be maintained indefinitely. Because of these regulations, the BLM spends a lot of money to maintain the Mustangs that are not adopted. For the Mustangs that are adopted, they are sold to private owners that are for an average around $125. As of 2012, BLM has removed more than 195,000 horses from public lands under this program. The National Research Council, the NRC, had a panel of 14 scientists which concluded that if BLM continues to manage the wild horse herds the same way, that this management will obstruct effective management of wild horses on public lands, and recommends the National Horse and Burros, which is WHB, to be more on a sustainable course. According to the article by Garrett and Ollie in 2013, the BHW program budget grew from $19.8 million in 2000 to $17.9 million in 2012. More than 60% of the 2012 budget was used to maintain captive horses, while 11% expended to capture and remove animals from public lands, and 10% for adoption programs. In conclusion, the feral horses of today have come a long way to how they were treated about 40 to 50 years ago. The BLM's main job is to protect the horse, and in order to do that, they need to perform roundups periodically. This may cause stress on the horse, but it is for their own good, and so then they don't repopulate at a steady rate. This process is the best alternative to allow horses to still free roam certain areas without damaging the area because of overpopulation. Also, the adoption process allows people to own a little piece of the idealistic Old West. Some researchers suggest that BLM needs to have more efficient ways of management since it costs a lot to conduct these roundups. Overall, the BLM is trying their best at making rounding up horses stress-free for the horses and workers and to make it run smoothly and humanely. Thank you.